All right, we should be live. Hello, everyone. It's been a little while since the last Incus live stream. So yeah, we're back at it. This time, gonna be looking at quite a few changes that happened since the last live stream, and then take a pretty easy feature request and just get that one out of the way. All right. So first thing first, what happened since the last live stream? Well, that's going to be a long list because the last live stream was on January 15th or 16th. Let's see. 15th would have been the first day. So let's try and get all the way back to that, which is quite a while back, especially given we've been busy working on this thing for the past few weeks. 19th, getting there. 15th. Okay, cool. So that's basically where we left things off. Just checking what we had on that day. Yeah, so just a bunch of fixes for hardware issues. And then, what was there? Yeah, tweaking LACP handling, tweaking a few other things. I mean, one thing that happened since the last live stream was that I effectively moved all of my production clusters, what is my two main production clusters, over to IncusOS. So both the cluster I've got here at home that I use for development, which got three pretty beefy AMD Epics, like 64 cores, 128 threads, half a terabyte of RAM each, and a whole bunch of NVMe SSD and some SATA SSD, as well as the data center cluster that serves, amongst other things, all of the public infrastructure for the Linux Containers project. That's actually been now fully moved to IncusOS as of last night. So that happened, which is very good because that means on top of already having it on a bunch of development machines and having it on customer systems, being directly impacted by any kind of gap or anything else is well, that tends to really help putting a bunch of things in place. I got reminded of that because of one of the commits just kind of skipped over. Where was it? Here, the tweak LACP handling. That's one of the things that came up when I started doing it on my, like running IncusOS on my own machines here, because I've got 100 gigabit Ethernet, like dual 100 gig ports. And without that tweak, we were only getting basically one port's worth of bandwidth in many cases due to kind of single stream, due to the hashing being just at the L2 level. With the tweaks to get L3, L4 hashing, now the traffic is properly spread between the different ports and get much closer to the 200 gigabit range when doing some tests. So that's good. All right, so there's a question around any FOSDEM related updates. Yeah, so we obviously, the reason why there was no live stream last week was because I was traveling to Belgium for FOSDEM. It was packed as usual. Normally we run both the containers and kernel dev rooms one day each. This time we only had half a day for containers on Saturday and then full day for kernel on Sunday. So that made it a bit different, gave me slightly more time to go and see, well, meet some other folks while at the conference. We also had a Incus dinner on Sunday for those who were still in Brussels at the time. So it was, I think in the end, who did we get? We got the entire Future Fusion team was there. And then we had 3 additional community members who came there, I think. Was it 2 or 3? I think 3 community members. And we also had some of the other Incus contributors who were also there, but at a separate table for the OCI, kind of the OCI container image project. So Alexa was at that table. So yeah, it went pretty well. And then Future Fusion had, we were using Monday and Tuesday to do a bit of a engineering meeting and kind of hacking on Operations Center, Migration Manager together. So we did that, and then I got back home yesterday. Anyways, back to what we have in, back to what happened since the last live stream. That was that first day. Then what did we do the day after? A bunch more tweaks around. So we've been debugging a number of issues basically around some TPM and secure boot hashes being kind of weird sometimes on some platforms. So we've been doing a bunch of tests on a variety of hardware platforms and then tweaking that logic a fair bit over the past few weeks. So you're gonna see a fair amount of tweaking, PA parsing, working around different UEFI implementation bugs and that kind of stuff, just as we were getting some feedback on that. We fixed an issue with the wait on LAN handling as well. Then what do we have? Yeah, more TPM and secure boot kind of checks. Added support, so that's a patch set that we put in IncusOS, but will not actually be used in IncusOS itself. So it's basically support for customizing the boot logo of VMs. So by default, you get the Zably logo because I'm the one building the packages and the firmware. But then when we do the build for Future Fusion, we want to replace the logo. So we've added some logic to support it. IncusOS itself won't use it, but then the fork of the repo, which is used for Hypervisor OS, will use that feature to customize the logo. So that was that patch set here. Next, a bunch of tweaks around smart. So we weren't exposing that many smart metrics. Now we've exported a few more, but also had to deal with some errors because we've had systems reporting impossible values. I think we had a system at a customer that was reporting several exabytes of writes to a disk, which is not exactly likely, especially for a completely new LUN we created 5 minutes ago. So there's effectively some issues, and that was causing a straight up failure of the storage API on our side. So we effectively relaxed things a bit so that if the smart data is just wrong, we now keep track of the error, we show it in the output, but we don't fail the entire thing anymore. There's also, and I think that's this one probably, some tweaks we've been doing around supporting offline installation of IncusOS. So the way that works is you would download the install ISO, so the main ISO, and then you would download the files from the matching image, so like they will update from the image server, and then once you've got that, you can create a recovery, like a rescue media that includes that update. And on system startup, IncusOS will notice that it can't reach the internet, and we start applying the application download from that secondary media instead of just failing. So that's basically kind of the story for how to deploy in an air-gapped environment. We've done a bunch of testing for that, again, because of a customer that had such an environment, and just made sure that everything worked properly and tidied up a few things. Okay. Since we switched to better machines in my lab, we also switched more of the tests to run in parallel for testing. So we get a full end-to-end validation of all of the APIs in IncusOS in, I think, an hour and a half now instead of 6. So that's quite a nice improvement. Some tweaks around installation time around installations. So that's basically to handle some machines using multipath fiber channel SAN devices as their installation target. They were being detected multiple times as they would. So we've been cleaning that up to make it handle that a bit better. Some more storage device identification issues, more secure boot, or in this case, yeah, secure boot measurement issues. Okay. And we also had an issue with like not all secure boot implementations using the same hashing algorithm, so I had to fix that. Yeah, so recovery on first system boot, it was part of the air gap work. Even more handling of offline systems within the patient center, so that's still the air gap to work. Then tweaks around seed validation. What we're doing here. Okay. Oh yeah, I remember what that was going. Yeah. So we've got default values for some of the state data, and here we had the issue of an empty seed effectively erasing default values and causing some errors. So we've tweaked it so that the seeds only override the keys that they actually contain instead of wiping everything clean. So that was that fix. We had an issue with systemd.sys update. Seemingly not always calling sync at the end, leaving, so if a user would then forcefully reboot the machine right after an update, which obviously we don't recommend, but it's happened. The ESP, so the EFI system partition, would be inconsistent, as in the OS update would be present on disk, but the boot entry would not be. So we fixed that by adding an extra manual call to sync. And then also trying to always reset the TPM during installation time. We've seen a bunch of systems where the TPM has like a dirty state and it just doesn't really want to work. So we're trying to fix that by doing a TPM to clear. In practice, we've often seen that those systems also using TPMs that are locked against clearing, so that still doesn't really work. But on some others, that might be enough. And on those where that's not sufficient, then you need to go into the BIOS menu and clear the TPM state from there. Alright, system uptime was added to the API, so we can just get that information easily. And there was a bit of a tweak needed around handling update checks on the first boot. Next, what do we have? Okay, what day are we at this point? January 23rd. Yeah, it's gonna take a while to go through everything. Alright, so more secure boot and TPM kind of fixes. Still tweaking of the daily tests. Documentation improvement around WWN for fiber channel multipath devices. And then trying to catch errors from systemd repart, because we had some systems at customers that would just fail to install, typically due to a dirty TPM that needed to be restarted and would not provide any kind of useful error or feedback. So we've tweaked things a bit so we can show the systemd repart output when in such a situation, so that it's easier to understand what's going on. Then I've done a bit of cleanup around the BMC handling stuff. So I've added the ASUS mostly generic AMI virtual devices to the list of these devices we should not be reporting to the user because they're basically just dummy virtual devices, and move that to a separate function called isBMC, which can then be called in a bunch of different places. Basically everywhere where we deal with disks, we can use isBMC to just filter out anything that's that we know is a virtual device that should be shown. Still cleaning things up, removing, like we are reconfiguring LVM to hide all physical volumes that are stored on ZFS. That's to avoid a situation where you've got a local VM, one VM that's running on a ZFS local pool that then has is using LVM itself, and that then turns visible and shows up on the host. We definitely don't want that, so I did some filtering to prevent it. We also had some weirdness with machines that support TPM, so only TPM 1.2, where the error was not super clear about what's going on. It would tell you that you need to use software TPM, but then if you turn on the software TPM, it fails because there's still a hardware TPM. So now it's trying to detect the TPM 1.2 and actually tell you to go and turn it off in the firmware in that situation. Okay. All right, so tweaks to secure boot for debugging, so effectively logging failures instead of just failing. That makes it a bit easier to debug. I did some cleanup of kind of leftover code that was not needed, so just clean that up. Then a bunch of changes that I think we'll see kind of sprinkle over the next few commits. I've actually dispatched that here. To disable logging as much as possible. We've got a systemd journal. Basically everything we run uses a systemd journal, and that's the only target we'd really like to use because that's also what gets streamed over syslog. So we've turned off logging for anything that doesn't log through the journal and kind of tweaked so that as much as we can just go through the systemd journal instead. Then a few tweaks to the OS customizers, that's the download website, to actually support YAML in there. And that allows doing the network configuration and some of the other options directly as YAML instead of JSON. It still allows the JSON syntax since YAML is a superset of JSON. And that just makes it easier to actually write those network configs without, typoing a missing comma here and there, as happens often with JSON. Also updated the documentation to have actual screenshots and examples for most of the server manufacturers. I can actually show that real quick, but if we do IncusOS doc, yeah. And now we do getting started, installing on hardware. We now have those tabs for most of the common servers. So the generic one is just basically what to do on AMI apt.io, which is the most common kind of firmware base for everyone. But then we've got instructions for ASUS, which is still AMI apt.io, but it gives a few more details for like what keys are safe to remove effectively. Cisco, which doesn't do secure boot correctly, so you need to do the CPM only mode. Dell, which has its own kind of way of managing secure boot. HP, which also has its own way. Bit frustrating, frankly, but yeah, they do have a way to load the certificates. So, anyways, HP, Lenovo, which is apt.io but quite heavily skinned, and then Supermicro, which is a straight up apt.io, but also with some notes on it needing to do multiple reboots to really turn off BIOS mode correctly, make sure everything is UEFI, and then turn on secure boot. All right. Then there was an issue with Oven where it would try to configure the service if it's disabled, so that's been fixed. More log disabling this time on Oven. Let's see what's next. Next we have, okay, so it's the beginning of that PR, right? So one thing we wanted to do for a while is actually move all of the built-in certificates and fingerprints and everything we've got all across the code base to instead be a bunch of files in a folder that are very easy to replace. That makes it super easy to create an alternative image. In our case, we use that for IncusOS, but anyone who wants to create their own flavor of IncusOS could do the same, where you just have a bunch of files you need to replace and then you're good. So there's a bunch of commits related to that because we need like extra functions in a bunch of places, removing hard-coded values elsewhere, putting some logic in place to actually store all of that. So I think that's basically this whole chunk here is that. Then I also modified the image customizer a tiny bit to enable TLS support and to export some API structs so we can more easily integrate with the image customizer from other projects if needed. Okay, then a bunch of updates because we were doing some fixes in Migration Manager, so we kept updating for a little while there. Then we found an issue with the TPM only security mode where systemd boot would measure the PE content of the kernel from within the UKI. It was causing some issues. Effectively, whenever the kernel would update, we would get a recovery key prompt on those machines instead of just going through. So we fixed that after identifying it. It took a little while to reproduce it, but now we've got a fix in place, and yeah, that took us a little while. More Migration Manager updates, and then some tweaks, which I think that must be yesterday's stuff, February 4th, yeah. So that was just a few more tweaks we need to do following the switch to the new way of managing keys. There were a few issues with that, so effectively fixing those issues. You might have seen on the forum that was causing some update troubles. So that's the fixes. Those are the fixes for that. We also kind of relaxed the channel handling because in Operation Center, we're going to make it possible for you to create as many channels as you want and assign those to systems. So the check that was effectively enforcing that we would either have stable or testing and nothing else, that doesn't really make sense, so we've been relaxing that. And that's it for what's been committed. Then while I was on the plane yesterday, I also implemented a feature request, which was to add support for memory huge pages config. So that's that PR, just waiting for it to get reviewed. But yeah, it just adds a config key, well, a section and a config key under the kernel config API. And that's it for catching up. That only took us a bit over 20 minutes to go through everything that happened over the past, 3 weeks? Well, yeah, 2 to 3 weeks. Now, for what I'd like to do today, if we go look at the issues, we've got quite a few things open right now. But for those live streams that we typically focus on features, so if we go look at that, there are quite a few less of those. Still quite a few things, but anyways. This one I just filed earlier, I think today. This is going to be slightly, I was considering this one for the live stream, but slightly too big to fit in an hour, especially after 20 minutes of catching up. This one will be very easy for Matthias to do, a bit less easy for me to do, so I figured I would let him have fun. Same thing with the network config rollback. That's code that Matthias is more familiar with than I am, so he will probably do that faster than I can. Huge pages now shows as being closed, so I'm assuming the PRs are literally being reviewed as we go. Yeah, it's gone. Did I open something else? Oh yeah, I fixed an issue with a chicken and egg type problem that I've been hitting now in our lab, so I fixed that too on the plane. Okay, so it looks like Matthias has recovered from his trip and is starting to merge things right now. Next, okay, so the open metrics, that's something else that we need more thoughts around exactly what we want to include for metrics, so not something I would want to cover now. So instead I went with this guy. So that's what this live stream should try and do, which is add debug processes kind of endpoints to get an idea of what's running on the system. It's pretty straightforward. I'm just thinking, PS output with tree enabled. That's the thing that's the most common as far as debugging. So if we just go and look here, let me zoom that in a bit. Okay, so when normally you don't have access behind the scenes of IncusOS, so you can't do that. But I'm thinking of just getting that output because that answers a bunch of questions that we might need when debugging. It shows us all of the kernel threads, so that gives us a good idea of what kind of hardware is in use and if anything gets locked. So that's convenient data to get. And then it gets us a view of the system kind of services, so we can easily tell if anything got restarted, is crashed, or is in a state that's blocked. And then probably most importantly, we get to actually see Incus itself in here and its processes. So if anything gets stuck, again, we can see it pretty easily. IncusOS, we can check if there's anything running underneath itself or if it restarted or it's stuck for some reason. And then the actual containers and VMs will all show up as well. So that's kind of the idea, is just like basically API to run PS FAUX in probably, I'm going to just implement exactly those arguments because that's tree mode, all processes, all users, well, with user column. Don't remember what X actually does, like maybe the extra columns, like the extended view or something. And then WW is for like basically extra wide, that gets me every single column that this thing can do. I don't know if it actually makes a huge difference. Yeah, 1W is like that, 2Ws is actually everything. Okay, so we do need the 2Ws. All right, so the idea is to literally implement an API that does that and just returns the output. That should be very straightforward, but there might be some extra fun because of just how terminals work sometimes. So let's see. For that, I'm gonna go look at the IncusOS code base. Since Matthias just merged my stuff, I get to actually pull and rebuild my branch. That will make it simpler for me. There we go. That's done. And now we need to first add a new API. So IncusOS internal REST, and then we should have API debug already. And API debug, So that's the API root. API root right now is log and text UI. I thought the text UI actually moved to internal. Is that a mistake for TUI to be here? I think it might be. Hold on. We might actually have a little bug to fix just in the process. Server should have the API structure. Yeah, that's actually quite wrong because it should list log and secure boot because TUI was moved over internal, which is not. That's a proper internal API that cannot be run remotely. Okay, so let me fix that. So we want log and secure boot instead of TUI here. Okay. Just do rest, fix, and debug endpoint. Sure. Okay, so that's done. And now that we've added this one, we can go and add another one because we're gonna need to actually list processes as also being an option. There we go. This is the endpoint for log. So we're gonna want something very similar anyways for processes. So I'm just gonna go and copy paste the whole thing. So here we go. And then fill in some of that stuff. So debug get processes, get process list of all system processes. I'm not gonna directly mention what command is run necessarily because we might tweak that over time. As it stands, I don't think we want to pass in any argument. That's the other thing that could be modified, like parameters could be changed in the future to allow for more customization. The output will be plain text, so text plain. And in case of 200, we are getting a list, text list of system processes. Okay. Yeah. Type string. And let's not even bother with an example because that's gonna be absolutely massive if we do not. So just changing the error here. Text list of system. This is go. In the case, so it's going to be slightly tricky because, so in the case of errors, we need to set this guy like here. I mean, there's no form to pass, so let's not bother actually. Okay, so that should be the main error we're dealing with, hopefully. Maybe not. And then at the end, we should do the text/plain for the output. Okay, so we just want output, and as mentioned, PS like that. Now, yeah, this actually needs to move further down. This can go here still. At which point we're basically dealing with just that's a good point actually. Since we wrap it in a, so the entire API is actually wrapped in JSON, and that's what we do with Incus as well. A lot of what I've just written is actually incorrect because we won't return plain text. What we're going to be returning instead is a string within a JSON struct. So instead of having JSON object here, we're going to have string of the output effectively, something like that. But the actual return type will always be JSON. So I need to go and update this guy here because that's not incorrect. So it is application JSON. And it's correct that this field is a string then. Okay, so that should be fine. We need to actually change the function name. So it's debug processes. And let's see, so set the thing, only allow get, run the command, handle errors, and then return the text value. Okay, that's fine. Next, we need to actually go modify the server itself to add the route in here. So that's here, do processes, API debug processes, there we go. Let's see if that builds. It's gonna take a minute to download the dependencies, and it was actually pretty quick. Okay, and it did build, so that's nice. Let's see if static analysis is mad at me for some reason. Let's see. Yep, unnecessary conversion. Oh, it's already a string. Oops. I thought it was gonna be byte slice, but apparently it's already a string. Okay. So given that, we can indeed just get the output. Okay. And let's try it. So to try that, I need to get into my what's it named on this machine? DevOS. Okay. So I need to go in here. Need to mount the tempfs on dev, then file push IncusOSD to DevOS root dev. Okay. Then let's do a little bind mount and oops, restart IncusOSD. There we go. Then I can use Incus query with dev local, which is what gets me into that particular system. That should get me, yep, the API, cool. 1.0 is fine. Debug. Okay, debug processes shows up there. And yep, sure enough, it's showing me my PS output. Okay, so that's the first phase done. We can actually add the API and everything. There, I'll just clear this thing here. Okay. All right. So that's easy enough. You can just do IncusOSD rest, add 1.0 debug processes, and that closes the feature request here, which is 820. Okay. So that part is good. Next, we can actually update the Swagger API model. There we go. It's slightly mad about something, I don't know what, but I don't think it matters. Yeah, the processes stuff is in there, so we're good. Okay. Now the CLI is the other piece we need to do. So this is kind of a weird one because the IncusOS CLI gets embedded in other projects. So we're gonna need to do some trickery to actually get a new version of it into Incus so we can actually test that it works. But yeah, we need to go into effectively CLI debug. And in here, what do we have right now? Debug log for the OS. Okay. All right. Wait one. Debug log. Okay, so we're gonna need to add a new section for processes. I'm wondering, so we've got a bit of generic wrappers, and I wonder if the show wrapper would actually do what we need somehow. Let's run the query show. Okay. What does show do exactly? So it runs the query, and then okay, it trusts as YAML. So no, it's not actually gonna do what we want. Oh well, let's just implement our own thing. It's not that difficult anyways. cmd admin os debug processes, okay. And then we need to actually duplicate that section basically to handle the process list. So there's no flags right now, so it's just as simple a command as it gets basically. Oops. Okay, get the system processes. It does support targeting, so that will be there. Those flags don't need to exist. That's fine. Processes. Yeah, one argument if there's a target, but that's it. And then the API route is this. Okay, we don't have anything to encode in the query, so that's not needed. Then we get the actual thing. There we go. And the struct for metadata is not a struct, it's just a string. Which means we can literally format print of data, and that should basically be it. Let's see if that actually builds. Apparently it does, so that was somewhat surprising, but good to see. And handle error. Okay, so there can actually be an error in that call. Fine, let's go deal with that. I think it returns how much it printed, so that's what I'm doing. Yeah. Okay, we've got a thing that prevents us from using format print because it thinks it's for debugging purposes, which it's not. So I'm gonna need to override this guy. It's for BDGO that we need to override. Okay. So let's do that. And it seems fine. Cool. So that's the CLI. Now to actually test it, that's where things get fun. I'm sure there's a better way to do this. But the way I usually do it is something like this. So CLI here. So that gets me a CLI package within my Incus code base. Actually, I should probably make sure this is up to date. Right. Is my CLI stuff what's getting in the way? No, it's not. Okay. Right. All good. Put the symlink in place again, and now if I do cmd incus admin os, I can change that to importing my local package. Should be incus v6 CLI. And then build that thing, and I should be able to try it. I'm sure I know there's a replace syntax in Go mode we can use to do that kind of stuff. I just never remember the syntax, and it's just easier for me. But if you need to do that more frequently, then using the Go mode replace syntax is probably the way to go. Looks like I didn't build Incus on this machine in a little while. Okay. Incus admin OS, debugged, which that processes now. We do. Processes. That was, I guess, my own machine, which doesn't work. Dev local. and we get a process list. Just making sure it's nice and clean, that there's nothing weird going on there. So there's the warning header for Avatar API, but other than that, the rest looks perfectly fine to me. Cool, that was pretty easy. All right, so let's look at the change. I think static analysis was already clear, but I forgot, so I'm gonna just go and recheck. Yeah, it's clear. So let's connect that. I guess CLI add debug processes. Since we're there anyways, I saw we had other API routes under debug which don't have matching CLI. So secure boot update, that's an action. So we might want to add that, and then secure boot event logs, so just the TPM event log. It might make sense to add comments for these two. They might be able to use a generic wrapper, maybe. I'm not sure. Let's see what happens if we query the event log. Also, we probably need an intermediate node at secure boot here to just give a simple list of what's available. So API debug secure boot. Let's go see. So somewhat similar to this endpoint here. Oh, actually that endpoint I messed up earlier. I forgot to change this. Okay, so let's just deal with that one real quick. Like that, and then secure boot, and I'm adding processes. So let's do 1.0 debug processes. Like that. So that goes into the fix up here. That goes into this one. I think the Swagger profile is also gonna need an update because of that. Okay, so that's the Swagger profile. It's going here. Okay, now I can actually add the missing API. So this guy. That should go for secure boot. Debug processes, secure boot here. Okay. Around here is where this thing should go. Debug secure boot get. Debug slash secure boot. Get secure boot debug endpoints with a list of secure boot debug endpoints as URLs. These endpoints have no guarantee of API stability, shouldn't be used. Yeah, that's fine. List of secure boot debug endpoints, 1.0 debug, secure boot, and what was the actual endpoints? Secure boot. Okay, the actual endpoint is event log. I don't think we list the actions typically. Let me check. Do we list the actions? Oops. OS 1.0 system. Yeah, we don't list the actions. Okay, so we should just list event log then. Oops. Like that. I'm kind of confused. I thought I had taken the entire chunk of code, but apparently not. Definitely have the Swagger stuff, but I'm missing the actual code, I think. Okay, So if we go back down here, right? So API debug secure boot. Okay. And I mean, currently we only have event log. We might as well use the full syntax anyways. Okay. Did that do it? Debug. Oh. Yeah, I did the camel case thing. Yeah, because it's done the same way here. Okay. Let's change that. Save and try again. All right, so that's working fine. Okay. And that should probably go into the fixed debug endpoints actually. Okay, which gonna need another Swagger update. Okay. Let's go and move those commits where they belong. So debug endpoint, that goes here, and then that goes in here. Okay, well, that's not happy. Let's go and deal with the conflicts. So internal rest. So there's a conflict here. Those processes doesn't exist yet, so it's just that. Okay. And then API debug also has a conflict here because again processes does not exist yet. So that can go away. This is the new thing. And we can remove that. Okay. So that should be fine. Yep, quite good. K3 base continue. And it's gonna fail on the next thing. There we go. It's doing a bit of a mess on this one actually. Okay. That's why are you doing this? Yeah. Okay. That's gonna be a problem. It's Git3base getting very confused and just gonna mix and matching stuff when it should really just show that there's like an extra chunk that showed up that they didn't expect. So that's not working. Easiest way in those kind of situations to actually just keep the existing expected content somewhere so we can just dump it back in place when the time comes. So let's do that. Do the rebase again. So this becomes here, this moves here, this moves here. Okay. That again, it's fading again, that's normal. So that's for this one, then API debug. For that one, it's just processes goes away. And then this goes away. Then the rebase can continue. Okay. And this one, instead of messing around with this stuff, we're just gonna restore the good values. So IncusOS internal rest, API debug, good. And then server go itself, which makes the delta just be the addition of the processes step as we want and fixes the old confusion stuff from the rebase. Okay. Yeah, more of that. Oh, yeah. This one is easier to fix up anyway. I'm just gonna regenerate it because it's generated code, so we can just do that. What? sure, but that's why is it seeing multiple things being modified? Oh, I see. Okay. Let's just wipe this particular change. Don't think we need that one anymore. Okay. Are we clean now? Just regenerate that swagger thing because I'm not sure this is good. Apparently there was a change, so let's do that. Merge it back here. And see if we're good. So latest commit is just the CLI. The one before that it's gonna be a messy swagger thing. Don't care. Previous one, add debug processes. That's the only thing that's in there. That's good. Previous one was fixing up the debug endpoint. So that's adding secure boot, removing TUI, adding the intermediate root. Okay, I think we're good. Just build this thing, make sure static analysis is happy. Then you can push that test binary, just make sure that the intermediate route and everything is all good. So unmount, remove from dev. Come on. Okay. Push the new binary, bind mount, restart. And now if I go OS 1.0 debug, okay, we see secure boot. Secure boot has the intermediate entry, and then we get the event log. Okay. The event log should be something we can render as YAML. So the show command should work fine on this guy, I think. Let's see if we can use that. That'd be nice. So incus admin OS debug. So there would be secure boot and then another secure boot event log. It's going to be quite a bit of CLI stuff to do that. Let's see. APS CLI debug. Okay. All right. So we want a new subcommand here for secure boot. Okay, something kind of like that. And then this is a subcommand, so we need to copy a subcommand to make that happen. So log processes, we're gonna put it all the way at the end. Incus debug secure boot command. Just put it like that for now. Okay, and then event log is the only command that we have. So that turns into something kind of like this, but that's why we might be able to use the generic one. So debug secure boot event log. Okay, don't need that guy. That stuff here. Okay, let's try go build to see. It seems happy except for the missing secure boot event log thing. That makes sense. CLI. So if I look at CLI system, there should be a generic show here that's being used. Let's see if we can somehow use that syntax because that'd be kind of nice. CLI debug. Okay. Okay. So it's basically command generic show. OS is COS endpoint in this case is debug secure boot TPM event TPM log or something, TPM event log, I don't remember. Anyways, roughly that. And then you just command as command event log command show. Something like that. Yeah, so that built fine, which is good. That's a good start. I just want to check the API again because I don't actually remember where the event log stuff is. Secure boot events dash log. Okay, yeah, so that's wrong. I'm probably gonna have to tweak it a bit to get the proper description generated for it. Like it's gonna give us something very generic right now, I suspect. Okay, so that built. Now if we rebuild this guy. Admin OS debug. Secure boot. Show, yeah, just did a generic show command. The proper. Okay, so that does show like the API route works. The command description and everything got completely wrong, but this we got there. Okay. If I do show help, yeah, that's what we need fixing. All right. So let's just go look at the general structure for this stuff again, because I don't remember the show command structure. It takes endpoint, entity, entity short. Okay. It's not as flexible as some of the others. It will always show details as the name, it looks like. Okay, so if the entity is set, that does change things a bit. Yeah. Okay, that's gonna need a tiny bit of work. The command name itself is name. Name is not that. Where's the short? Use. Yeah, this is not the most generic command I've seen. I think some of the others have been tweaked to be a lot more generic. If we think of like action, for example, which is run. Run is quite a bit more generic. Yeah, short flag, long flag description, default value. Yeah, that one is a lot more generic. But I also don't think it actually shows any of the outputs, does it? Makes the query. Gets the output data, but it doesn't actually show it. Okay. Might need to try and retrofit show with some of those extra flags. So the short flag, long flag description especially are kind of the ones I'd like. Oh, that's the extra run args. No, mind. So it's actually, yeah, it takes a lot more things. Name description. Okay, let's see what we can do. This is turning out to be a bit more than I expected. All right, so let's just do name and description at least. And I think what we simply do is we just override the value. I don't know why we call this name when it's actually more like the description, so I'm gonna just rename that. Okay. So, oops, description. So just allowing the override. And we need to do the same with the actual name. So name defaults to the show. So, yeah. Okay, so that should tweak the generic support a tiny bit so we can make use of that. Let's go with this. So name is event log. Description, show the TPM event log. Let's see if that did the trick. That'd be nice. So now the show command should be missing. Yeah, the show command is missing. It shows instead that we have the event log command supported. Event log is show the TPM event log. Okay, so that's looking good. And again, hit the right remote. Yeah, that works. Okay, so just gonna be do a quick static analysis. Okay. Okay, good. So IncusOS CLI extend generic syntax. Okay, and then this adds the TPM event log feature. What else was in there? Was there something else in that API that we should be showing in? We should be showing the users. Let's see. That one was an action. It was just to trigger an update, I think. Yeah, secureboot update. Okay, we can do that. That's actually pretty straightforward with the CLI, I think, for those. So Incus was the CLI. If we look at, say, system, the reboot, for example, would be a good example of that. There we go. So we should be able to just go in CLI debug in the secureboot section down here and add a update command. Update the secureboot keys. This doesn't need confirmation because that's easy enough. Endpoint. Yeah, that might need some more tweaking actually. So the endpoint would be debug secureboot like that. Oh, the action is update. Yeah, it should actually work if we do it like that, I think. And let's update command. And 226. What's going on? Oh yeah, I forgot. I effectively overrode that. Event log command and then build this thing. Okay, so that's fine. Then we can refresh this one. We should have two commands now. So event log still working fine. And now we have update. Updates, yeah, obviously complaints. Okay, that worked. So I think that's all of the missing CLIs. So let's do a quick static analysis again. Then we can contribute those extra commands and we should be good to go. So IncusOS CLI and missing debug secureboot commands. Yeah, that's turns out pretty clean. Nice and tidy. All right, let's push that up for review then. And if we go here, compare. add process list to debug and extend debug CLI. Go. All right, so that will close the that issue to add the process list to the debug API, and in the process also cleans up kind of the API in general and adds the missing commands. And I think that's gonna be it. Just slightly over an hour, and yeah, quite a bit of work done on this one. Just looking at the chat now for anything in here. There's a mention saying that it's sometimes difficult to troubleshoot Incus with containers failing to start due to mount issues. Yeah, that can get slightly tricky, mostly because it's not Incus doing that part really. Incus generates a configuration which it hands over to LXC, and then LXC is what's actually failing. So if you're in that situation, I mean, let's see if I can easily cause it to happen here. So if we create Debian 13, D13, okay. I mean, it's not really a thing on IncusOS because on IncusOS we can't really just pass host paths, so not the most relevant for this live stream. But in general, if you've got this kind of issues with Incus, you've got a disk, you've got a source from, I don't know, TMP does not exist would be an example of something that would fail. And you mount that in MNT foo. Okay, it actually figured it out. TMP does not exist, so it apparently does exist, but then if I go and nuke it, maybe I can actually cause the container to fail to start. No, it still validated this correctly. Yeah, that's unfortunate. What can we do to make this fail? Turn this into a symlink to nowhere, maybe? I don't know. Let's try just a good old chmod 0, like halfway through the path. That might do the trick. Nope, still worked. Okay, getting this to fail is actually harder than expected. Yeah, seeing like NFS mount would do it here. I can see like, when NFS is kind of tricky because of the permission issues on it sometimes, so that could definitely explain that. But okay, basically what I wanted to show, even though making it fail in a bad way is actually turning out to be slightly more difficult than I expected. What you would want to do is, if you're really debugging some LXC issues, actually do a raw LXC log level trace. That will make things very, very verbose. And then you would start the container. Normally that would fail, it wouldn't succeed, but you know. And if it fails, you then do show log what you want, and you get quite the wall of text. But that includes showing you every single mount that's happening in this case, and the different errors and all of that kind of stuff. So that's typically what we would ask whenever we get those kind of issues, is basically, okay, turn on trace logging, start again, and then you'll get a whole lot more details on exactly what's going on inside of the container log. So that's basically the best way to handle those kind of situations, because that's mostly outside of Incus. Incus does a bunch of tests ahead of time, which is what it was doing here to me with like, oh, this thing doesn't exist. It tries to do that kind of stuff, but then if it can't and you end up in an LXC failure, then bringing the log to trace and doing a show log is kind of your best option. All right, so gonna leave it here for this live stream. I said like the pull request is now open, the tests are running, documentation should clear because there's not a ton there. End-to-end should hopefully clear too, and then this can get merged. The CI changes are always a bit funny because once they land here, we need to actually update Go mod in all of Incus, Apache Center, and Migration Manager to pull the new CLI options in. But that will happen by the time the next release comes out for those different projects. All right. Thanks a lot for watching. If you've got any questions about any of this, feel free to leave them down below, or you can go in the community forum. And otherwise, I'll see you in, well, it should be next week. So see you next week for the next live stream. Have a good one. Bye.